Hi, this is Richard Enos with Collective Evolution, and we've come to Vancouver to interview a very special person, Cal Washington, who's the co-founder of the In Power movement, and he's going to tell us how we can take our power back. He's worked with programs designed to prevent smart meters from being installed in houses, and now he's working on some programs involving 5G vaccines, and specifically 5G is what we're going to be focusing on today, understanding if we feel that 5G is hazardous to our health, how we can prevent installations from happening in our communities. So welcome, Cal. It's a pleasure to meet you, and it's going to be a fun interview.
Oh, thanks, Richard.
Okay, so where I wanted to start, because I've seen a lot of your stuff online, and fascinating stuff involving the law, involving what we can do to take our power back, what happens in court, what's really going on, beneath the surface. A lot of interesting information that's really valuable to us. So I'd like us to start with sort of a broad overview about law, understanding law, and I'm going to start you off with something from the Declaration of Independence, and as a context for understanding about something called natural law, or the spiritual realm as you refer to it. So let me just read a little bit from the Declaration of Independence, and then we'll take off from there. It starts off, when in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind require that they should declare the cause which impel them to the separation. So they're talking about the separation from Great Britain, and they're explaining we have the right to separate. And they say, and this the famous phrase, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So they're coming from a place where they feel we have natural rights as human beings. This is the basis of all law, natural law or spiritual law. So maybe we can start with that, and your understanding of that, and your understanding of whether this is indeed our natural rights, and these are things that we can reach for, and we can fight for, and we can actually achieve.
Well, I agree, and some key words in there is it's self-evident, and also what they say, rights including, and they just among those. So there are more that it insinuates there's more to this, but at least that, and the fact that they declared it. So they worked within the system that they were under and did things in a proper way. So it wasn't done in. It ended up being violent, but it started in violence. It was like, this is what.
It wasn't based on the might, that the power that they were using was based in something true and universal to all human beings.
And it was done in a peaceful way. It was done on paper and declared. Had who they were sending it to just went, okay, we agree, that would have been it.
Right.
So it ended up in violence only because the other side of the correspondence didn't agree.
Well, right, and they go on to list the instances where they tried to appeal to Great Britain and talk to them about the different things that they were doing, which they were saying this is tyrannical and this is unacceptable and this is not, we're not going to accept this, and so on and so forth. And they continue to try and negotiate, and they say, well, we shouldn't change government just like that for transient and easy causes, but after all this that we've done, we feel justified, and we feel like we have God on our side, or the divine judge on our side, in declaring that we are cutting ties with Great Britain and we are free and independent, and we will create our own system of government to protect those freedoms.
Well, exactly. So it was a declaration, and it was done in a proper way, and they went through the proper steps of trying to rectify the situation. And even at this, which is a fairly drastic move, it still was not violent in any way. It was just, this is what we are now going to do, and here's the reasons why, and they're sound reasons. And how do you feel about that? They didn't put that in there, but that's the intent of it. This is what we're doing. Please acknowledge that. And they didn't, and therefore there was a conflict. But it's the idea that they did it in the proper way, and they went to their. There's a biblical principle. You go to your brother in private, and then you try and resolve something, and then you escalate it to a couple of witnesses, and then you escalate it to the elders, and like you go up in order. You don't just jump to, to start shooting, right? So,
Right.
and so they did everything according to proper principles, and they wrote it very eloquently, and it was ignored, and it ended up in a war.
Right. Now, this was an incredible time in history, but we could say we're at an incredible time in history right now, wouldn't you say? And that we're sort of facing the same situation where we're seeing an onslaught of tyranny from those who are governing us, and we're, having to make some decisions about, are we going to take back our power and create sort of a different kind of system to live in? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, and going back to the American Revolution, you have to understand the context of that, because we're looking in hindsight, and it looks like this heroic thing. But when those guys signed that Declaration of Independence, if it didn't work and they didn't win the war, they would have all been hung for treason.
Right.
So there was a commitment to this. This is like do or die. There's no middle ground. There's no by putting your name on those documents, you were committed 100% to the, like, if it doesn't work, I'm going to be hung, and they would have known that.
Right.
This was not a. So you got to understand the context. They look like heroes, but at the time they wouldn't have known how this was all going to play out.
Right.
This was a risk, a calculated risk.
Right.
And we're at that same point where if we don't actually get involved and commit to a serious change, there's going to be some dire results of that, apparently. So we're at that kind of crossroads again, worldwide, not just at one country.
And so there's a feeling that we need to come to a greater awareness of what's going on in order to be prepared to be active and stand for something that's important to us, and stand against things that are, hazardous to our health, like, we're going to be talking about later, the 5G networks that they're trying to set up, right? Yeah,
and again, in the Declaration of Independence, I think, as you alluded to, they had a sense, and it wasn't. I think it was more than like a belief. They understood that God was real, and that there were rules that were higher than the apparent rules of what a temporal being could set up, and they wanted to exercise those rules, and they felt that those were very real, and that there was very real help for that. And in order for you to sign your name on something like that, when the military capabilities of the American, of how they were at that time compared to the British, that was a big risk.
Right.
They had to have really believed in something more than a belief. They had to know that this was possible and actually needed to happen. So they were willing to sign on that.
And they felt like they were in the moral high ground, right? They were in the position of truth, and they were aligned with, the spiritual forces of justice,
Yes.
right?
And that's what they said. It's self-evident. And they wanted to exercise that and take back their authority at that time.
Okay, great. So we find ourselves where we are now under all sorts of different laws, and a lot of which we don't agree with, and they're just coming at us, taxation and different technologies being introduced, different stuff just being introduced into our society. I'm wondering if you can give us a bit of an overview of when you step down from this natural law that we talked about and try to explain what kind of laws are we actually living under and how did they come to be? The laws of the kind, like Canada, the United States, Europe. I know it's a big question.
Yeah, it's over a long period of time, and the more they're digging up, they're finding out some of these things go back further than what we've been told. But by and large, what I found, because I had as I was growing up, I had this idea of how things were, and that was obviously placed there. However, and so I had an idea, and most people have this idea of how it works. But what I found was when I got in there, it was different.
In there, you mean into the courts?
Into the court system. So
Yeah.
I was dragged into the court system, and I found out that it wasn't as I thought it was. And it was just that that kind of drove me, because I wanted to find out what it was.
Well, what did you think it was, first of all? Like, what were your thoughts?
Well, I thought, from the TV or whatever, I don't know how I got it, but anyway, I thought the courts were about a balanced system and finding the truth, and then finding the justice in that for all, and coming to a agreement, or an understanding, or even if it was just a ruling, that it would have been fair for all concerned.
Great. Yeah. And I think that's a common perception, and that's the perception that's been put on us.
Yes.
To think that, okay, everything's all right with the world, the government's, controlled by the courts, and the courts are just and
independent and
independent. Yeah. Okay.
So that was my understanding going in there. And the few times that I had watched something or been in there, it seemed like that. It didn't. I didn't notice that it wasn't that before until it was about me, and I had to go there, like almost at least twice a month, and that's when it started to dawn on me what was going on, because some of the things that the judge would say just didn't make sense in that understanding of what was going on. And so I tried to figure out what was going on. I could tell there was some other agenda going on in there, and couldn't put my finger on it because it didn't make any sense. In hindsight, I can see what it was, but at the time I didn't know, and so I just started asking questions, and because of my makeup, I resisted. Like I kind of went, no, I don't like this. This is wrong at a core level. So I kind of put my foot down a little bit, right, and was able to keep my foot down through a long period of time and a lot of flack.
So can you give us a sort of an example of how in a court situation you actually did something a little different? You said, no, I don't accept that, or...
Well, I didn't really do that at first. It was more, the judge would say something and I would ask, like, I can remember saying one time, where am I that you just said that?
Right.
Like, what country am I in? What court? Like, what has happened here? Just that question, and pointed right at the judge. I had no, I just, like, what is going on in here? And the judge looked at me and she goes, you're very sophisticated, Mr. Washington. Keep going. And then I went, in my head, like, what does that mean? Because you got to understand the context. I'm like, don't even know, like, I can't figure out what's going on.
So that really blew your mind that
More even, like, oh, now what does
like
that mean,
now
and what
there's
is it?
really something going on here that's not evident.
And what,
It's
yeah,
under the
and
surface.
what does keep going mean? Like, what did I just do that I'm supposed to keep doing it? I just asked a question because I was puzzled about where I'm standing, that these things are being said to me.
Right.
And so it was a few things like that, and a couple of police officers also shook my hand after our encounter and said, keep going, I know what you're doing. And you're like,
Glad you do, because
because I got, I started getting inklings, and as I learned,
but something didn't seem just in what was being said to you and the way things were proceeding, and you were kind of like, what
yeah,
gives you the right to say that or do that? Like, what is it?
in the context of this is a independent, balanced, just system.
Yeah.
There's something else going on here, because otherwise I wouldn't be hearing these things and seeing these things. So it was that kind of kept me going, and then I didn't like the idea of some institution telling me how my family was going to be from here on in, and how my children were going to be raised, and their life is going to be this. And I went, no, I don't think so, because there's a higher order of things, and a family it's a unit, and it has to function in a certain way. Otherwise, the offspring end up off balance, and then that can lead to, the society starts to break down. So it's all of that all tied together that I resisted this.
Yeah, sort of the self-determination of the family unit, and that's what you really railed against at first, right?
Yeah, that's what gave me my strength to get through all of that, because I had to go through a lot. It was overwhelming.
Okay, so you, based on principles, you challenged that, and in the course of that whole process, you just sort of opened up to more investigation into what the heck is going on and how I actually got some power to do something, and you were hungry for more information about it.
And so that led to what are termed as gurus of sovereignty, and however you describe that, it doesn't really matter, but you know what I'm talking about, the people that have methods of dealing with court, or ideas about how things are and everything. So I went, learned a bunch of those, and tried everything. I was willing to try anything. That's another thing. I had no I wouldn't say I didn't have fear, because I did have fear in the beginning, but I was still willing to try anything. And certain things ended up with certain results that weren't in my favor, and so you would stop doing that and move to the next thing, and that was the journey. It was mostly trial and error.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and so let's step back and sort of paint a picture of law and the law that we're under, and out of what you've learned. I know you've talked about the idea that we're actually living under a system called law merchant, right? Lex mercatoria.
That is one of the things that we're living under.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's layered, and that's on purpose, so that you don't see, number one, that there are layers, and number two, that they're, how to operate in higher layers. So the bottom layers are meant to keep you sort of hypnotized and boxed in, so you don't see anything else except that. And people that end up in the just us system go to what's called law school, and this is not, with all due respect to anybody that's done that, you go to a law school that is controlled by others. So what you learn there is you're told to learn this, regurgitate that on a test, and now you are a lawyer. Just that, if you just thought about that for a second, if they omitted anything, you wouldn't know.
Right.
So therefore, the system proliferates and is self organizing, and keeps the system alive, because there's less knowledge that's put out from the beginning. So those that are in that system only understand what they've been told. And so it was that, I understand, once I learned that there was another, like a higher jurisdiction, and I started operating it, again, just trial and error, that's when my life started to change. There was still a period of time where they fought back, but there was a definite mark in time when they started running from me instead of me from them.
Okay.
And that's the key. And that's what is, as I kept going down that road, it just solidified and solidified and solidified that this is actually true, and I can't be moved from it anymore. No matter how many letters I get saying there's no basis in law for what you're doing, I just ignore them because I'm past that.
Ultimately, if you ever get into that point where you have to, go to court, you know that you've got the right on your side, and the court will have to respect that, because
it's past that point.
It's even past that.
They won't. I will never appear in a court.
Interesting.
Some of the thing I say is I would have to be dragging a dead baby and firing an automatic weapon into the air before I would be dragged into a court.
Okay. And you're a person that the system doesn't want in court, and they know you're going to cause all sorts of trouble and.
Yes.
Okay.
Irreparable damage. So they've already tried that, and I went through the whole thing, including time in jail, and that's the best they've got, other than extreme violence.
Okay.
So there's nothing. They don't have anything else.
Okay. So if you talked about going into a higher jurisdiction, right? Learning that you can operate from a higher jurisdiction. So is it possible to explain, like, the jurisdiction that you're at, what you've realized is the law that's operating at that level?
Well, there's an ancient commercial system, and it's called, in modern times, well, even in old times, it's called law merchant. Lex mercatoria is the Latin name. It turns out, as more archaeological digs come up, that this went back further than even we thought. And but it's a jurisdiction that is more like customs and principles of operation, in order for merchants to conduct themselves internationally. As things started to change and people got into boats and started moving large cargo, around the known world at the time, and having international, what would be called international fairs, where they would sell wares, etc. You had a lot of transient people from all over the place, from different languages, different money systems, different laws, different ways of doing things.
Right.
And of course that, if left alone, would just be mayhem.
Right.
So this system of doing things evolved, and it was dynamic. It wasn't fixed like regular laws were. It was more worked with the times and was based on principles of fairness. And all the merchants agreed to this because it actually worked. And it was fast litigation as well. If there was a problem, it was done within a day, not within 8 months to a year in the normal common law way. So you didn't have to have burdens of proof that you had to have in the common law system. It was more based on truth in an affidavit form or swearing to it, and then a group of other merchants would decide what was true, and they were trying to get to the bottom of it quickly.
Yeah.
And the reason for this was because ships would leave at high tide, and if there was a problem, that ship was going that day. Like within 4 or 5 hours, when that high tide comes in, that ship is gone, and there's no
way of stopping
there's
it.
no remedy, because that guy is gone. He may never ever come back.
Yeah.
And or the ship has cargo that you claim is
Yeah,
yours, or whatever.
you can't stop. You can't stop all these ships just because
No,
you're arguing about
no,
something,
because
right?
a lot of the stuff was perishable as well. So you couldn't argue for 8 months about a load of bananas, because at the end of it, once you find out who owns the bananas, well, the bananas don't exist anymore. So that the law system didn't, as it was, didn't work for merchants. It wasn't dynamic enough, and so this thing called law merchant came up, and you can read on the internet, and there's just so you know, there is a vested agenda to call it a myth that it didn't exist. But even within inside of the some of the treatises I've read, they give examples of the court actually functioning. They have roles, like there's historical roles of actual cases exist. Like so, it existed, but they say that there was no lex mercatoria because it's not codified. You can't find the book of law number 1.8 blah blah blah.
Okay.
But it wasn't like that, and that's the part they leave out.
Right. So it was functioning very well. Once everybody came to an agreement about it, everybody was satisfied that in that domain, it's really a good system.
It was a very good system, and it started to compete with the common law system, with the king's courts. People liked this better because it was, I mean, corruption, who knows how that was, because historical books always leave that stuff out. But either one of those things could have had some corruption in it, but it was more the quickness of everything. So in today's world, it's called summary judgment.
Okay.
So things are done not based on proving something, it's based on probabilities, and the judge will tell you that.
Okay.
But
probabilities.
But see, my way of thinking, I'm going, you're operating in lex mercatoria. I know what you're doing. So they try and disguise it, but it's actually lex mercatoria.
Okay, so you're saying that lex mercatoria started to kind of get into the domestic legal systems of countries because they liked the way it was operating for the merchants and the international sort of shipping and all that. So was it the people that wanted this introduced into certain areas of their domestic lives in countries?
Well, partly. So you had what were called pie powder courts that were at the fairs, and they were very transient. And then they started to get more solidified, and they were called staple courts. And there were staple towns, which were mostly the port towns. So there was an actual building, and it got a little more, present, not so, disappearing with the fair. So there was a building, and it started to become a little more solidified.
Yeah.
And the king was okay with this, but then it started to, it started to take over, and he wasn't getting his cut and all. There's a million reasons why. But so what Lord Mansfield did, who was the Chief Justice, what we would call Chief Justice at the time, they fused it into the common law. So now the merchants could actually go into the common law court, but still operate in lex mercatoria.
Okay.
So the judges were told to take judicial notice of the lex mercatoria or law merchant when a commercial case came in. It was meant to go faster, in the same way and with the same kind of principles. And over time, they just stopped talking about it, but it's still going on. And that's, once you understand that and you go and sit in court for a while, you'll see that that's what's going on in there. And it just dawns on you. The light bulb goes off. Oh, I see what they're doing. And that's why when I was first in there, like, what's going on in here? There's something not how I thought it was supposed to be. And that's the reason, because they're operating in commerce.
Okay, so can you take us from those origins to, this idea people talk about that Canada is really a corporation and they use capital letters and birth certificate and like where we are now? How did this become, we're talking about Canada, United States, let's say. Can you explain to us how lex mercatoria is operating here?
Well, Canada is a special example, because it started off as a corporation, and that was the Hudson Bay Company. And people don't understand this. It was the government, and it was for 200 years. It wasn't like, fly by night. It was entrenched here. Mm-hmm. It had 200 years to really clamp down, and it did. The problem with it, so you understand that it started off as a corporation.
Started off as a corporation, the Hudson Bay
Company. It is a for-profit and read the charter. It's self-explanatory. Number one, it was meant to be a monopoly, complete.
Yeah.
They were allowed to use Navy, armed forces, armaments, cannons to enforce all this. They were allowed to take people's stuff if they disobeyed it. Like if you got caught dealing with the natives directly, everything was confiscated. Your canoe, your horses, all that stuff was happening.
So these are all the people that came from Europe and were the settlers in Canada, right? So
Yeah.
they were under the jurisdiction of this corporation.
Yeah, and that actually went into where the United States is now, because this all predates the United States. So you can see the map, the original map, and of course they kept expanding it illegally. And then that whole thing, if you read the charter, they were allowed to make their own laws and enforce them, and they were allowed to have courts. So just, the bells should be going off. That was in the charter, courts. So a guy was sitting up there, acting like a judge,
Yeah.
but it was a Hudson Bay court.
Right.
How do you think that's going to go? When you're charged of whatever it is, putting your canoe in the water without paying your 10 shillings, you lose every time in there.
Yeah, or you go and try to say Hudson's Bay is being unfair to me because, they're taking away this, and you're going and talking to an employee of Hudson's Bay, sitting in the judges.
And the same thing is today. It has not changed. And once you read that document, and if you put it in today's context, you'll see that it's identical. It has not changed. It changed for 26 years when they passed the British North America Act.
Right.
But if you go into the history of that was only to force the surrender of the Hudson Bay Charter. That was the sole reason for it, because that's what happened within a year of the Dominion being created. They surrendered the charter. They couldn't compete.
So the Queen of England got the charter back from
Yes.
the corporation that was Hudson's Bay. Right?
Yes, because what you'll also see in that document, it was perpetual. There was no end to this document. And it was signed by a king. Done. And here's another problem with that document. The cut to the king as written was very meager, like a couple of elks and a beaver, this, that, like nothing.
Right.
So somebody along the way of 200 years would have went and looked at the document, this cut we've been sending, on a nod, wink, wink, which I'm sure that's how it started. According to this, we got to send a couple animals over there if they show up, and so they probably went, we're not sending you nothing. And there's nothing you can do about it because it's signed by your great-grandfather. And they couldn't revoke it because it was signed, or at least didn't want to revoke it. But whatever happened, she formed a dominion, competed with it, put a railroad in, and they surrendered. And then she got it. So it was surrendered officially to Victoria, her successors and heirs, which means it's still owned by a successor or an heir of Victoria.
So Queen Elizabeth is still the Queen of Canada.
She's the owner of the Hudson Bay Company. She's the owner of that charter and therefore has the authority to make her own laws and enforce them.
I know you've talked about the Queen taking an oath on the 1611 King James Bible in terms of her governance of Canada. So could you elaborate on that, what the meaning of that taking the oath is and so forth?
Well, that's a deep thing, but basically she has to uphold the laws. You can read her oath yourself, but she has to uphold the laws and customs of Canada and her other possessions. And so understand that the word possessions is in there, and think about that. And she has to uphold the King James Bible itself and actually defend it. And look that word up. It's not a passive word. It means it's an action word. You have to take action. You can't just agree with it. There's action involved with defending. So read those words, and so that's what she is sworn to do. Now, at the same time, because Victoria, she is the owner of the Hudson Bay Company, or at least could be. Some heir of Victoria is the owner of the Hudson Bay Company, and but the Hudson Bay Charter has limitations to it, and the laws that they make under that charter can't be repugnant to the common law, and of course cannot be repugnant to her oath. And in that charter, all the governors and upper management had to swear an oath of fealty back to the king or queen of England. And that was to keep the common law as the real law. Because if you just give somebody the ability to make their own laws and enforce them, it could end up becoming its own country.
Right.
And just break away, really. So they always had to swear an oath back, and that's still happening today. So anybody that gets into government or police or any, even I knew a lady who worked at the liquor store. She had to swear an oath to Queen Elizabeth. So all of these things are still in effect. So you have to swear an oath back to what would be deemed a foreign monarch, if we were a real country, but we're not. So we're still under that charter. All the things that are written in there are still happening.
But ultimately, all these officials, it comes down to they're subject to the code in the Bible and sort of acting in accord with that, right?
Yes. So that's the layers that you got to kind of see. You have to sort of connect the dots. And why are they swearing an oath to the Queen Elizabeth? It's partly because of the charter. And then what does Queen Elizabeth's oath say? Because they are subject to that, because they have a full-on allegiance to her. So no matter what her thing is, that they have to be in allegiance with that. So then you go a step further. Well, okay, now it's the Bible. Well, if it's the Bible, I better read what's in the Bible. You see, so you got to follow the hidden layers of this. And therefore, what's written in the Bible, the politicians in Canada have to obey, period.
And so therefore, the way we take back our power in the larger sense is to say, hey, here's the Bible. It says do things this way. You're doing things that way. And you promise to uphold this. And so I'm going to make you liable for my problems.
Yes.
Is that the way it's...
That's how I did it.
Overview.
That's an overview. So what ends up happening, and if you don't, now you're putting Queen Elizabeth's oath into jeopardy. And I use those words. Do you want to continue? Because that's where I'm going next. You see, and I go in order.
Right.
Because that's the principle.
You step up to...
Yeah. So
right.
If you don't do this, then I am forced to now implicate the Queen. And then it goes on from there. You get into spiritual realms.
Right. So
some of the things are written in the Bible when the Israelites came out of Babylon. So you got to understand the system in the Bible is called Babylon. And you'll read it in Revelation 18 and also in Daniel 2. So Daniel is a story of how a small version of mankind came out of Babylon. It's a tip. It's a method. Like it's a story, a small version of what we need to do now, because it's the same thing over and over. It's just there's nothing new under the sun. So what happened there was he invoked what were called watchers. So now that leads, what are the watchers? And then so you go down these rabbit holes. Okay, well, let's find out what these watchers are. And so then I would just try this stuff. I had a vague belief in angels, but my belief in angels changed because of their reaction to it. Because I just wrote it in there. I'm going to say watchers. Sounds like a cool thing to do. While the reaction was swift, and I went, okay, there's more to this watchers thing than even I understand, because I'm writing to people like at the UN and monarchs, etc., who there is no apparent oversight. You get what I'm saying? There's no apparent upper jurisdiction. This is like the top of the world. And when I write them and I start talking about archangels, the reaction was very swift, where within a couple of days, a police officer is phoning me and telling me not to show up in court.
Right.
And I went, that is, somebody's terrified of this watchers thing. What is it?
Yeah.
You see, so that's how we did it. It was more like, I'll try that, and I have a vague belief in it. But when you see the reaction, we're like, okay, that they're not off in some heavenly realm. They're imminent.
Yeah.
Like something is right here, right now, watching, and they know it. I didn't know it until I saw what they did, and now I know it.
Yeah.
You see, that's almost everything I did was like that. And
so we could go so far as to say that, the Queen of England and people of her sort of knowledge about what's going on at the top swears an oath on the Bible, and she knows that there are spiritual forces that are looking over, that could come in and actually implicate themselves into what's going on in the world if certain principles are not followed.
Exactly. But they've set it up in a way to disguise that, like more like try and make it disappear, and then they put layers in order to make you think that this is how it works down here, and you're not even aware of this, let alone operate in it.
Right. And it's kind of put out there, all this spiritual talk is put out there. It's like mythology, it's like, it's airy fairy stuff, and it has no real bearing on life on the planet, especially in politics and especially in economics, right, on the planet. We think, well, that's got nothing to do with these forces. But what you're saying is you found out when you go up to the top, on top of the top are these forces, and they're kind of waiting to be activated by people who are awakening and invoking them, bringing them forward.
What you can tell is there's rules of engagement. And we have the biggest part in how those rules, which way things are going to go.
Right.
And once we state something, it's done. And at those levels, if you state something inside their court system, they just go like, well, rule against you.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. And everybody keeps pounding on those walls, and it's not a judgment, because I did it too. I read Acts until I was, my eyes were bleeding. I'd stayed up, I was working during the day and staying up till 3 or 4 in the morning reading Acts, because I thought that's how you deal with the court. And I would read and put together arguments. And I would go in there with the, beautiful arguments. You could see them. They're like, whoa, rule against you. And I'm like, well, what's going on in here?
So what you're saying, you're basically saying you eventually found out how to bring the whole thing into play, whereby you realized your own personal power, what your personal rights are. It's kind of like going back to natural law, right? You're kind of invoking your natural rights, and you're speaking the right language, and you're making the right statements to invoke the whole system, the whole overseeing of the whole judicial process on the planet.
Yes.
Right.
And when you go into the Bible, like on the page 1, it says, God created Adam and Eve, and there's a story about that, and there's a lot to that, and but that the Creator breathed into this being, and he became a living soul, and then he gave them dominion. That's the contract. not rights. Dominion. And I was having a conversation with a guy yesterday, just texting, and how do I get my rights? I said, you don't have rights. You have dominion. Rights means that there is something that's above me, and
Above you, having given you,
giving
granted
you rights, or I
rights,
have to
right.
plead in order to lessen their, or temper their control. That's what a right is. So yeah, you're this, but can you please at least let me breathe and have a little bit of food and some space?
Yeah.
No, that's not what we have is
Right.
dominion. We're supposed to be on top.
Right.
And so people need to understand that, read it, experience it, and that's how it is. These laws that they were talking about in the Declaration of Independence, that's what they're talking about.
Yeah.
They said it includes this, but it's actually more than that.
Yeah, and they understood that, and it was on those solid grounds, on that rock, that they made their declaration, right?
And they put their lives on the line, and I can't overemphasize that. Because when you've been in the trenches, and I have, and I paid some dues, it's not pretty. Mm-hmm. And these guys went way further than I would have. Well, I don't know what I would have done, but that is a big commitment. Either this is going to work or I'm going to be hung.
Mm-hmm. And in a sense, we find ourselves in a similar position where it's not just knowledge that's required, it's action taken based on that knowledge, where we're standing for something, right? We're going to say, this, we don't want this, we want this in our society, we don't want this, and we're going to take action against this if you bring it here.
It's even deeper than that. It's more like we have, everything they're doing is on a claim. And I found out something about claims. So from their point of view, claim is the strongest word in law. So they just make claims, and the claims can be false. This is what you got to understand. This is why it doesn't make sense to us, some of these things, because it's not in our way of thinking. They have a different way of thinking. Mm-hmm. So a claim can be a false claim, and yet it will stand in law. It will stand until somebody comes with a higher claim.
Okay.
And so if you don't come with the higher claim in the right way, it's like everything's technical, then this claim stands. So everybody goes, yeah, well, Rome has everybody's souls. No, they don't. They claim they do. They don't actually have it, but they do because of the claim. Mm. But as soon as you come with a higher claim, no, you don't own my soul. Oh, and it's based on this. Done.
Right. Oh, it's like any law in society that people say, well, you have to pay taxes and you have to do this and you have to do that, until you say you don't, right? And then if you know the right way to proceed, and
yeah, and you might have to take some flack. So you got to be willing to stand on that, because they're going to test you in some cases, like they did with me. The testing is getting less and less because we're actually gaining ground as a whole, and they're starting to shrink back. But and now they're moving to drastic, let's just eliminate them. So that's where we're at, and it comes down to just stating your claim and standing on it.
Okay, great. We're going to get more into detail on that in the second half when we talk about, we'll get specific with 5G, and we'll talk about, well, what can we do in this particular case? That will be the model for, other stuff like smart meters, vaccines, so on and so forth. I want you to talk a little bit, we talked about Canada and how it's, it's a corporation. That's what it is, not even really a country, it's a corporation. What about the United States? Are they the same? Are they different in that regard?
The United States is a corporation, like the capitalized United States, but there is a United States that is the republic, and that's based on the Constitution. And those that go into the corporate courts with the Constitution, it it's not valid there, and they're told so, but and they kind of go into shock, but it's actually true. You can't bring in the Constitution in those courts in the way that you're trying to do it. They're not constitutional courts. They're corporate courts.
Corporate courts. So what you're saying is that the republic, based on the Constitution, has a higher jurisdiction than the United States all capital corporation. But if you go to court, you're in the corporate court, and you gotta do. And is that law merchant? Is that commercial?
That's commercial, and it's by agreement. So it's the same thing as if you work at Walmart and you've been working there for X period of time. So you go there, you put time in, you give up your freedom to go there, and they give you what's called money. If you decide one day, well, because I can have the pursuit of happiness, I would be happier on the beach because this Constitution says so. So you phone your boss and say, well, I'm not coming today because I'm pursuing happiness on the beach today. That wouldn't fly. The Constitution is irrelevant at Walmart in that sense. Yeah. So you got to understand that that's what's going on. You've agreed to this corporation called the United States, and yes, it is deceptive. But if you vote, your SSN number, your birth certificate, all are part of that corporation. So they are assuming that you're okay with this until you say otherwise in the proper way. Mm-hmm. And it's not easy to do. They really push against that.
So the republic is formed first, and then they bring in the corporation called the United States later in U.S. history?
Yeah, it came in later.
Do you have any, like, a brief sort of history of them?
I don't have any dates on that offhand, but there are key things that happened that show this. So that there are people who teach this in the United States. I'm more the Canadian history because I had to deal with that. But it is definitely a corporation, and the courts are definitely corporate. There was one case in particular where they definitely moved away from the common law, and that was the Erie Railroad case, and that changed things forever, as far as them, how they operate. But one thing I'll tell you about the birth certificate, that's how they've turned you into a merchant. And so going back to the Lex Mercatoria is in the common law courts.
Yeah.
They could only use that when merchants were there. So they had to make sure that everybody that came in there was a merchant.
Gotcha.
That's how they did it. So they created this thing called a straw man and capitalized your name, turned you into not you into a corporation, but they made a corporation that has a name like yours. Same thing they did with the countries. So the countries they're actually corporations. We're told they're countries, and they have a Olympics every 4 years and to solidify that, and they have songs and they have flags and banners and all this stuff to constantly put that in your head. But countries don't really exist. And so that capitalized name is the corporation, and the number is your SSN number in the United States or your SIN number in Canada. That is your corporate number. And so the minute you try and get a driver's license, a bank account, credit card, mortgage, anything, first thing they ask for, the number, to make sure that you're a merchant.
And then, so everything proceeds with the law merchant. You're a merchant. Your dealings are on that level of jurisdiction, and we don't even realize it.
No.
And we wonder why we don't understand what happens in a court.
Exactly. So once I started to see, because I came through the hard way and I banged my head against this thing, I had all those questions like, why am I losing even though I'm winning? And once I went to a seminar on this, epiphany after epiphany, I like, there it is, that's why, and it just now I get it. I see what's going on. Because I had the context.
Yeah.
I had all the experiences of all these anomalies. Like, why is that happening? And it's consistently happening. Like once I saw the that there was this other thing going on. Now, oh, well, now it's like obvious what's going on. So then I just started operating there. And again, still trial and error. But the first move that I made as a merchant, because now instead of fighting it, I went, okay, if I'm a merchant, here's my first move.
Let me act it like a proper merchant, knowing
In the
my
proper
rights,
way, knowing exactly how this works.
yeah.
First move, judge runs out of the room. I went, okay. Now we're on to something.
Yeah.
And like I said, there was still a period of time, maybe a year, where they were still trying to, fight back. But after they held me for 60 days, at the end of that, that's the last time I was in court.
So why don't we end this segment? I want to hear about this time you spent in jail and kind of describe that situation and what came from that, how that moved you to the next step in your understanding of what's going on.
Well, like I said, I did some common law. I did a mixture of common law and law merchant. So I used what's called prerogative writs, and you need to look those up too. That's a key for anywhere where the common law is, and one of them in particular is called quo warranto, and it's a old common law writ. And what ends up happening is the queen becomes the nominal, or the king becomes the nominal plaintiff. So as the realm was going out, they had lords that were, kind of held small pockets of people, and taxes came through them and then back to the king. So it was a kind of a spread. But they didn't have the internet, and they didn't have planes, and they didn't have cars. So as the realm spread, anybody could really get up and say, well, I'm a lord, the king made me the lord, and now I'm blah, 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 blah. And, start collecting taxes, and nothing is going back to the king. Like, how would you know?
Right.
So there was a writ called quo warranto, which says by what authority, and if the person didn't prove it, then there was a problem, and it would go back to the king. So the king was actually a plaintiff on that thing, because it's possible that the king is not getting their cut from something that's untoward, right? So that writ is still alive, and so I would use that because the premise of it is, by what authority are you doing this? And you have to prove it. It's a common law writ. You have to actually act on this, and you've sworn an oath back to what's her name there, and therefore this is all still available to me, and I want to know where your authority comes from specifically. And if you can't do it, then I'm going to assume you're operating in commerce, that this is a corporation, that I am correct. And therefore, if you enforce your laws, which I can prove they're repugnant to the common law, then you will owe me X amount of dollars for this, whatever it is. It's just a straight up deal.
Okay, so in particular to that situation you were in court, where you got sent to jail, can you tell me like what the fight was about and what ended up happening?
The fight was about driving without insurance.
Okay.
So in where I live, BC, they had what's called ICBC, and it's the government insurance for cars. So everybody has to do it. It's a law. As I was learning, and I had read that act many times, like I said, because that's what I did in the beginning. So I knew the act better than most police officers, and could get them all turned around, and they'd make phone calls, and then they'd come back. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I told you. So I knew the act really well, and inside the act, then they've changed it, but I was able to give what's called a commercial instrument to the finance minister, and it would be called taking financial responsibility in the driving context.
Okay.
And within the act, they were supposed to give me a card and a sticker for the inside of my windshield, so that police officers would go, carry on, you're good. So we did this because we figured out what a commercial instrument is. We'd learned all that, because if you didn't know what it was, you'd be just like, well, that doesn't apply to me because I don't even know what that is. Well, we figured it out, and so we did this. And the ICBC refused to give us our card and our thing, and it's according to their act. And So then we went after the finance minister and said, you're the fiduciary on this. You're holding the instrument. You need to make ICBC give us our card and our sticker. We get letters from the Attorney General. You can't do that. You can't make Minister Taylor your fiduciary. And if you have a problem, you need to go to a court. And if you don't have a lawyer, here's 1-800 hire a lawyer. Same letter I get. I've had hundreds of them. So we just kept going through our commercial process. On the day of default, she steps down.
Okay, now by day of default, so explain how that was created.
So the process in commerce is a 3-step process. You state your claim, and then you give if they don't respond, then you give an opportunity to fix it, and then once that time period is passed, then there's a notice of default. It's all done outside the court system, just like Lex Mercatoria. It was not in the court. It was done fast. Judgments were like bing, 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 based on affidavits, and this is the truth. If you don't answer, this is what's happening, and we're taking your stuff.
And so you're doing this outside the courts, and you're doing that in correspondence with officials, and
yes, because
that's how you're proceeding.
Yes, because this is a commercial endeavor. I asked you if you had any proper authority to be in a government, and I know inside that they didn't. I know they don't have it, but I at least went through that process.
Right.
You didn't answer, therefore you are a corporation, therefore you're subject to commercial law. Here's my move.
Okay, so it was getting up to the default deadline.
Yeah, we sent the default. Mail was delivered, late morning. She's gone in the afternoon. And she was being groomed. You could see her. She was in the news and paper a lot to be the next premier. Like she was moving up the ladder.
And what would you say would be the reason that they didn't actually give you the sticker? And
well, if they give it to me, I'm going to tell you, and I'm going to tell Jeff, and I'm going to tell Bob, and everybody's going to be doing this.
Perfect. So she was told, well, you can't, by her higher up, she was told, you can't do this. So we never got a response from her directly. We went to ICBC, which is just down the road from where we are right here. There's a corporation there, big building. And so we went in there because they're supposed to issue this thing, and they are part of the government. They were part of the government. I don't want to get into that story, but anyway, it's now a private corporation with one owner, and that is the government. So it's a different situation. It's not actually part of the government. It's a for-profit, so they don't have to publicly say how much money the thing is making, all that stuff. So there's a million scams like that going on over here. Yeah. BC Hydro is another one. So they used to be crown corporations, but now they're private corporations with one shareholder. Yeah, so you can figure that out. And they did a bunch of stuff. But anyway, so we went to ICBC. We got some kind of manager because we'd already written, and they said, well, come down for a meeting. So we go to this thing, and you have to sign in, and it's pretty closed. And we end up in this room that's kind of locked down, and there were some people sitting there pretending to be customers or whatever. They were there for some reason, and I looked at them and I whispered to the guy. I went to the guys. Those are military type people. Like they're here to listen or whatever. I don't know, whatever. But they're not. You can just tell they weren't what they portrayed themselves to be. Yeah. And so the lady comes out and she looks at the paper and she goes, "Yeah, Minister Taylor." And then her face starts going red, and she's just reading this, and then she's looking at us. We're staring at her the whole time. She's reading and then looking, and you could just see, oh no, they found it. You could just see it. Like her body language was like, what are we gonna do? This is correct. Yeah. She
couldn't find anything wrong with it. We're gonna have to have a meeting, and we'll get back to you. Okay, that's what I thought. And so got a phone call the next day. Nope, not doing it. So we went after Minister Taylor. So that's how that came about. Okay. So Minister Taylor was Carol Taylor. We never heard from her at all. So the Attorney General, the Deputy Attorney General, wrote on her behalf because that's how it works. So he's like a lawyer. He's he's a guy that doesn't get voted in. He's the actual one that sort of Attorney Generals come and go, but he's the actual entity behind all that. So we kept getting those letters from him, and then when we just ignored them and did our process, she stepped down and left politics with no notice. And we saw this type of behavior over and over again because everybody says that, well, that's a coincidence. And we thought so at first too.
Yeah.
Because, as like I said, we were going through just trying stuff, and was that a coincidence? Like same day? But after 14 of these, you go, no, this isn't now.
Well, and if what you're doing is actually what you're doing, then these people are in big trouble and they better step down, right?
Well, again, we're learning this as it's happening because of the reactions. So we're going, okay, this is actually real. This is not some, fantasy thing. We're actually hitting something here because they're running, and it's always top people that ran, never bottom people.
Right.
People you would think are in the know, they are the ones that tend to step down.
Right. Yeah, other people are, they don't have the responsibility. Ultimately, it'll go up to a certain point, and then the person who's aware of it is going to take the consequences, right? Is going to have to pay for.
Yes, but it's more like a knowledge base. People further down the pyramid have only limited knowledge, and so they look at what this paperwork does as it's nonsense, and we hear that a lot.
Yeah.
But when you see the upper people running, you go, no, well, you can think it's nonsense all you want. They don't think so.
Right. And you've seen that ongoing. You've seen that the higher up people who have been read into these things understand exactly
what you're doing, and they know it's very real, and more than I did at the time. And the reason why I know it's real is because the reactions that I got over and over and over. So you go, okay, this is like more than real. Like I don't have to even think about it anymore. And so I'm never deterred by letters. There's no basis in law for this. I see that like thousands of times. Mm-hmm. And everybody that does our process, they get those letters. And I just tell them, yep.
It's another one of those claims, right?
I could build a house out of that, of those papers. I got thousands of them.
Yeah.
And yet, top people still run.
Okay, I think this is a good time to take a break. So thanks for that, Cal. And when we come back in part 2, we're going to be talking about 5G. Cal, basically, let's start with what is 5G as far as you understand it?
Well, to be blunt, my opinion is it's a weapon system. And the sooner you come to that realization, the better, even though that's a hard thing to swallow. It's better to deal with the truth than to be in some kind of deception or an illusion. Because if you're in an illusion, you will act according to the illusion rather than the facts. So coming to the truth is really important to get free. So it is my opinion that it's a weapon system. It's designed that way. Everything that I've seen, I'm not a scientist or anything like that, but everything that I've seen, it's well thought out, and it's actually, when you see the depth of it, it is beyond, in my opinion, beyond what man could come up with. I'll just put it that way. It's very complex, and this information came from either somebody very smart or outside this realm. It's kind of mind-boggling. With that all said, people are going about petitioning or going to class action type suits or trying to change legislation. This is being rolled out beyond the idea of countries. It's worldwide, so no one country or no one set of laws has like 100% effect on the whole thing. You may be able to regionally do certain things, but worldwide, it's moving forward.
Now, I just wanted to ask you if I can interject for a sec to talk about like what a lot of activists are saying. They're mainly saying, well, this hasn't been tested properly. We don't know if it's safe, so it should be stalled. So they're taking that angle. But for you, like it has been tested and they know exactly what it's doing.
Yeah, again, that's the illusion that it's somehow this is an oversight or a mistake. What's happening? Because a lot of people can see that this is harmful, but they're wondering why this is coming about, and why hasn't this been tested? Why can't we see the tests? Because it is a weapon system, it is not designed to be safe. It's designed to cause damage and or death. Like any other weapon system, you wouldn't, like during the Second World War when they put mines in people's fields, if you went to your government and said, I think there's some dangerous things in my ground and I really want these to be tested for safety, and that tank that's going down the street, I think that's against the Motor Vehicle Act, because I'm pretty sure they shouldn't be having that type of vehicle on the road. They would look at you like are you insane?
Yeah. They're just not seeing things the way they are.
The way they are. So it's not about that mine was put there for benevolent reasons and they just forgot to test it. They tested it. They know what it does, and if you step on that thing, it will blow your leg off. They know that.
And it's the same with 5G.
This is the same thing with 5G. They know exactly what it's doing. And some of the science that I've seen, and even some very brilliant speakers, they talk about the certain frequencies that you're using and the way they packet the digital information, etc., and the effects on the body. They're studying all this, and they think it's an oversight that why aren't they seeing this? Like this is so wrong. It's because it's designed to do that.
Right.
And as soon as you can get your head around that, then you know what it is you're dealing with, and then you will start to look outside of that little box you're in. That this hasn't been tested. It's been fully tested. It's just tested for harm, not for safety.
And we were talking earlier, and you were saying that they've tested it and they've seen when it has such effects as to affect people immediately. They realize, well, that won't work because people will automatically see it's a danger and they'll shut it down. So they have to have something that causes damage, but at a rate that can't really be picked up right away.
Subtle, and this took them a long time. So, I had somebody gave me a classified document going back somewhere between the First and Second World War, and they started dabbling with these types of technologies back then, and some of the results were instantaneous, and or the next generation there would be a massive birth defect. So you would you could put two and two together very quickly. But what we're seeing now is these things are subtle, and there are a few people who are extra sensitive that are tipping us off that there's a problem, but most of us aren't even aware of, don't really feel it as much. And but it's still having an effect because it's happening at us on the subtleties of your body,
cellular level, and
and even at the because we operate on Schumann resonance, which is the resonance of the planet. All our systems are based on those frequencies, so we are frequency built. We're built that way. Our subtle bodies, etc., operate on that. Our DNA even operates on frequencies, and so they're dabbling with that, and they're trying to change things, and so they understand how it works.
So would you say that this is a completely different thing from 3G, 4G, being like, a telecommunications network sort of setup, right? Where you're getting, with 5G, you're going to get faster downloads, and that's what mostly people are talking about, right? Is this something that is completely a new thing? They're installing a weapon system and camouflaging it as the next generation of telecommunication system?
Well, from my experience in other arenas and just some of the research I've done, I would, and this is my opinion, I would say that the whole cellular thing was a setup for this, so that you would slowly agree to all this. So once we're like, you can see that everybody's addicted to these wireless devices now. Like if you travel, like I travel transit a lot, and there are very few people that aren't looking down at some kind of gadget, and like very few. So we're very addicted to these things, and we all have them, and then downloading speeds for gaming become an issue, and people want more speed, more. So they've created that desire and that we want it, or we at least like it, and therefore now they can move into a weapon system, and we won't be as alarmed. If they came out with these gadgets 20 years ago and started putting them up, we would all be like, "What's that?" Mm-hmm. But because it's been a slow boil, we're not. How the analogy of the frog, if you slowly boil the water, they don't notice as much. So right. You drop a frog into boiling water and they instantly jump. So it's the same thing. They're very historically they've been very smart about things. It's not the intelligence. They have a long-term plan. They don't do things too quickly. They're very subtle. They create the problem first so that the solution comes. Right. So like it's always the same MO. So if you look at the fact that cellular phones came in, it makes sense that was the end goal in the first place, and that a lot of this technology was thought about back then.
So what would you say then, from their point of view, is the agenda of installing 5G, which is to say this weapon system that's going to be in all, the plan is to have it in all the neighborhoods, all the cities. What's the end goal for that being set up for them?
Well, one can only theorize about that. It has the potential to reduce the population drastically and fairly quickly or slowly. It has, when you get into the subtleties of what's going on, they're putting nanochips inside of us and quasi-living organisms that are partly technological and partly organic, and they're using fetal, live fetal, it's even hard to say, but anyway, they're using fetuses, aborted fetuses in numerous ways to get that alive part, and it's quite dark what they're doing. And so they're trying to take biological things that we would normally call biological systems and turn them into technological systems, or fuse that at least in some way. So the ultimate goal would be to get men and women into a robotic type of state of being for ultimate control, so that dig the hole, it's more like a robot that doesn't have, or has less and less of its own thoughts.
So less will, less choice.
Less of all the human experience that we now have.
Right. So and would you say it's possible that also this being a weapon system plays into the targeted individual sort of phenomenon that's playing out, where they feel like if someone's being a dissident, if someone's causing them trouble, they can actually target that particular individual?
Oh yeah, that goes
into it.
Yeah, that goes without saying. You won't be able to hide from the surveillance, because they want to have it as this is their, this is what they're trying to do. Whether they can actually physically do it or not, that's another question. But the idea that's being put out there is they will have full control over watching everything that's going on, listening. It's to the point where they can detect a heartbeat underground, and like it gets into some pretty crazy areas.
So complete control and no real way to escape the system at some if this all gets installed.
Technologically, yes, there's no way in what we would call 3D to escape it. No, but there, the creation is bigger than that. So there are there are avenues.
Okay, so let's talk about, because we've painted the picture. Not a very desirable future if we allow 5G to be installed. What can we do about it? What power do we have in this case? So this brings in your whole in power movement, right?
The whole thing is, like I said, I believe it started with the whole cellular technology in the first place, which led up to this, and the computer age. And but because we're agreeing with this, that's how they're getting away with it. So this is a military move, but it's not military in the way that we've experienced it before, where an army out of a country or even a religion would deploy weapons or move troops, etc. Because that's a military action, and there's rules of engagement in that. What they're doing, all of the 4 agendas that we're dealing with, are all being done commercially. And so it's beyond countries. It's in commerce. It's Sprint. It's Verizon. It's BC Tel. It's that's who's actually deploying the weapons. So those are all corporations, and they all have to deal with laws of corporations, contract laws, and then if you get into the ancient ones, you have to deal honestly in your contracts. You have to give there's offers and acceptances and all these things. So because I can see all that, that's how they're doing it. And so they're putting offers out there, and we're going, yeah, this sounds good. Faster speeds, 5G sounds way better than 4G and 3G, right? These are all misnomers. So they're getting our agreement with this. So that's how they're moving it forward. And it's called tacit agreement.
Tacit agreement.
Yeah, so the only thing you have to do in any kind of commercial thing is conditionally accept an offer. And because they've made everybody merchants through the birth certificate, which we talked about before,
yes,
you are a merchant. And therefore, merchant laws apply. And merchant laws definitely apply to them because these are corporations and corporate type people. And all they are interested in, for the most part, is money. The very top, they understand what this is, but anybody down the pyramid money is the motivator. So that's all you have to do is understand how it works. Do a conditional acceptance. I accept your 5G, or I accept your vaccinations, or I accept your smart meter, or I accept your spraying in the air upon you proving it's safe. Now the safety comes in.
Okay.
So because now there's a contractual obligation.
There's a condition to agreement.
To show. So now you have now brought in let's see the safety testing. If you don't show up with safety testing within X amount of days, then I'm going to assume that these things are not safe, and therefore we are now in a tort situation where you are harming me. Here's my fee for you harming me. It's that simple.
Okay.
So that's what you do, and that's, like I said, upper people go and they run. Lower people go, that's ridiculous.
Right.
But the higher up you deal with things, the more it affects the rest of the pyramid. You remove the very top where the money is, how are these people going to get paid? Are they going to keep doing it?
Right.
No. So it's about attacking the thing at the highest thing that you can understand, And even that pyramid in 3D, there's realms outside of this, and when you can start to understand that and state your claim there, and or your case or your commercial process, your contract, that's when you start to see real results. So this is about us getting together, doing something with one mind and one intention and one one move, and it will have an effect larger than the group. Like it becomes an entity unto itself, like a flock.
Okay. Now let's take a practical look at a hypothetical situation. You're in a town, so you're a person in a town, and you don't want 5G in that town. Now, is there something you can do prior to any announcement that they're going to install 5G, or does it have to be predicated on there being an announcement that 5G will be coming into the network, and who's doing it and that sort of thing?
Well, because I've been around the block a couple of times, I learned a few tricks from them, and that's the English language can be. I don't want to say manipulated, but it's kind of like that. You can make words work to your advantage, and I learned that because they were working to my disadvantage. So I learned how they do it to some degree. I'm not a master, but I'm pretty good at it. So the document is worded along the smart meter, and any meter at or near my dwelling and or workplace. So in the 5G, it will be worded in the same way. So it doesn't have to be in your town. It has to be at or near your town or where you live.
And that being what kind of area? Or you just leave it like that?
We also have, well, I think you're getting it. But for clarity, what we said elsewhere in the document is all words are as the claimant understands them and defines them, so that it's clearly written down. No, and
it's in plain English.
Plain English.
But there's a sort of a vagueness about the specific meaning of what near means, how near is, and
exactly
that sort of thing.
Yeah. So it protects everybody, so there's no, they don't have to define what near is. They get to define it at the time. And the thing about contracts, and I'm saying this right out here, so the other side's watching this.
Yeah.
You can strike that clause out of the contract where the claimant gets to define the words. It's just a negotiation. Mm-hmm. You're given the opportunity to do it.
Right. And are you saying that they'll never take that opportunity? Because
it means they're agreeing in principle. It's now a counter offer, and now
yeah. So
they're stuck.
Right.
And that's the beauty of commerce. Once you understand the old Lex Mercatoria, it was like this. It was very dynamic, and therefore you would never try and take advantage of another merchant, because it would double down on you. It would. If I tried to claim that you owed me $1 million and I was making it up, and then you went, I accept that I owe you $1 million upon you proving that I do. And if you don't prove, you owe me $2 million. You would never ever try it,
right?
Because it's gonna come out, and I'm gonna end up paying more than what I'm trying to scam. The problem is they turned us all into merchants, and they said, yeah, you got the opportunity to call us on all our BS, but they didn't tell us how it worked. They didn't even tell us that existed. And then there's a legal maxim that says the ignorance of the law is not an excuse.
Right.
So you were supposed to find out. Well, I found out the hard way, and I'm here to tell you how it works. That's right. It. It's just, it is what it is. I didn't invent this. Right. I just had to find out the hard way, like the everybody else. And now it's not as hard because I'm telling you, but I had to find out the hard way. And then once I learned it, that's when everything changed for me.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, and we're all the beneficiaries of that process that you went through. And the whole idea is now we've got some really valuable information, and let's put it into action.
Exactly.
So I'm trying to understand, like, I live in Mississauga, and I create that document. Who do I send it to? How does that work exactly?
Well, you have to figure out who it is that's doing this at different levels. And so what we're suggesting is each person send a 4, and we're going to have an automated system that will track everybody that's doing this, and not in an evil way. We just want to be organized. So we will keep track of who you're sending to and however many others have sent to that same person, so we don't end up sending too much to one and not enough to another. So we want to be organized in this, like any other force. And so we suggest that each person send a 4. It keeps the cost down. You can send them more, but it's sort of designed for 4. So you want to try and do somebody that's at your utility, and or depending on which thing you're talking about. But in terms of 5G, somebody at the utility or the carrier, the person like the company installing it. In some cases, there's a separate company that's actually doing the install, even though the contract's with the main telecom.
Subcontracted out, yeah.
Yeah. And then you want to do a politician that you feel is part of the problem. And you can generally people in their area know who's who. And then maybe somebody at a federal level or even at a world level, like UN or, Illuminati. I'll throw that word out there. People can take.
You have any mailing addresses for us?
No, we are also doing. We're asking people to send in their respondents ahead of time, and then we will double check to make sure everything's accurate and make sure these people exist and their addresses are correct, and then you can pick it out of a database. So it'll be we want to try and make everything as accurate and make sure there's no mistakes or wrong people getting anything or anything. We're trying to keep everything on the up and up and as straightforward as possible, and be able to verify each person's process.
Yeah.
Because there's reasons for that going forward. So.
And make it feel like a cohesive group process that's working together.
Absolutely. Right? There's nothing better than feeling, there's nothing worse than feeling like you're the only, you're alone and, I'm coming up against this thing. But when you start to see the numbers growing, you feel like there's something happening. You're a part of something that has something to it. And as that grows, you'll start to see the effects of people leaving office. They will be reciprocal of each other, which will make this thing grow more, which will make more people leave. And so it'll become self-evident, like the document said, and you'll see the light and the dark. The light will be expanding and the dark will be equally disappearing.
Right. Wow, that's pretty epic stuff that we're talking about.
It is very epic, but this was foreordained. Like, if you believe in that kind of thing, this is what has to happen for us to move to the next level. And they've pushed far enough. For those of us that are starting to sense this, but more people are going to sense it one way or the other. And we're at the stage where either this works or it doesn't, and there's no. You can't be in the middle anymore. You can't just sort of carry on with your life as it was, like one way or the other. It's that's it. Like, there is no more. Everything's okay, and I'll just carry on with my thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we always talk about, personal evolution and growth, and also we talk about change starts within, right? And there's this sense, and I've always had this sense when I've heard you speaking, that you're learning things, and you're not learning things to be able to take advantage of the system, trick the system to your own personal profit. You know, we talked about the 300 million lien that you put against the Queen, but it's not about, you know, getting 300 million from the Queen. It's about learning the process of the power that you have inside yourself, right?
Yeah, and even to that end, like the empower, like our inner workings of the like our corporate structure, for lack of a better word. I could have easily done this like as just like me, but I set it up so that there was a board, so that even I'm accountable. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
And whether I really needed that or not is debatable. There's no way to know one way or the other, but I set it up that way so that there was no question about that. It doesn't. It's not even a possibility.
Yeah.
So these were decisions that were made, and everything that we've done is like that. It's very. We're trying to be as clean as possible, and you know, nobody's perfect, but we are very cognizant of that. That this has, what we're doing has to be clean.
Yeah. It has to be a model
of the new thing.
Yeah, of what you're replacing this old system, which was totalitarian, and, you know, one guy says he's the king and he's doing this, with the system where nobody's above anybody else. Yeah. And there's sort of, like you said, a collection of equals all contributing to the conversation and having their say, and eventually you gain consensus, and you go forward and you have that collective power.
Exactly.
Right.
So we're board run at the core. And then we have concentric, you know, people are given more authority, because you like, I can't run everything. I can't know everything that's going on as this thing goes up big. Like this, it's not possible. So you have to give people full, you know, pretty much full autonomy.
Yeah.
And people are rising up into those spots and understanding the I wouldn't say the gravity of it, but the seriousness of this. And you know, we reiterate that if you're going to hold somebody accountable, you have to be accountable.
Yes.
And we take that seriously. Like we tell you up front, if you're not prepared for this, and like we don't judge anybody, you know, about their religion or their lifestyle or their beliefs or anything. We have core beliefs that transcend every religion.
Right.
Like, we're mostly coming from a Bible point of view, but the what we're putting forth is just universal things that make sense for a society and a group of beings to cohabitate on the planet. It just makes sense. Like, don't take your brother's stuff. Don't kill him.
Right.
You know, don't sleep with his wife. You know, that kind of thing. It just, you know, pretty much the 10 Commandments, and the whole common law is built on those premises, and going way back, but it's just kind of been lost. So,
well, do unto others as
you would have them do unto you,
right? That's the basic principle.
Yeah, and that's how Jesus broke it down. But when you really think about that, what he was subtly saying was, he is you. Right. If you read it that way, then it all of a sudden takes on a different meaning. Love your brother as yourself, as he is you. You are me, I am you. Like, there is no separation. Like, that's an illusion. And if you can understand that and live like that, why would I want to hurt you? I'm hurting me.
Right. And you're exactly talking about, you know, the way the organization is structured is for everybody to see that. We're working together. We're working as one. We are one. This is the next step in our evolution. This is where we're going. The way the company is modeled is after that. The actions we take are after that. It's just like, you know, the Declaration of Independence. They say, we really believe in our hearts that we are doing the right thing, the just thing. We are being honest and truthful, and we are using our integrity. We believe we have support from higher power.
Yep. When
we stand in this place. And doing so is not only effective, but it's the greatest experience you can have in life.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're finding that. And if you talk to just some of the people that have come up in the last year or so, they all say this without prompting. Like, if you get them alone, they're like, I've changed, and I can't explain it, but it's like something's happened to me, and I like it, but I don't know, it's just, you just start to change. You start to become part of the thing, and you can choose any time not to, because there's a lot of people who have gone, wow, I don't like that, and then they leave, and some of them don't come back, but others do. They kind of, you know what? There's nothing wrong with that. I'm actually going to come back, and we just accept them, and like, no big deal.
Yeah.
Everybody's free, and it's not a top-down thing. I mean, there has to be some organization that looks top-down, but it's not like that. It's more of a trying to build something that, in my opinion, God can actually inhabit, and that's what we need here. And we just haven't been able to set that up for so many years because we have belief systems that have been drummed into us, and we act a certain way, and we're creating a reality that's going to end up in our own demise.
Right.
So we just need to realize that, turn around the other way, and 180 degrees, and then the reality will follow us that way. It'll just become this other thing.
Yeah, I mean, we have to take some ownership in the state of the planet the way it is, based
Absolutely.
on the level of consciousness we've been living at. Right?
Yes.
And so again, that's why in the process of this conscious activism, which is what we talk about a lot at Collective Evolution, you're gaining awareness, you're becoming more grounded in what brings us together instead of what elevates us over others. We're coming together, and we're then modeling the type of civilization that we want to create in the future, where government is organized, again, around the Declaration of Independence, where we want the government to protect our freedoms. We want the government to protect us, to be able to live and to be able to be happy. And so they're working for us. Where the real power is we are human beings, and we have these rights, and they are granted to us by the Creator.
Well, I take it another step, and then we have more than rights. The rights have the connotation that there is somebody who is in control of me in some way, and therefore I have to temper that
Right.
in some way, and therefore I get to have a little bit of space. I believe it's actually the opposite, and that we have full dominion here, and we don't need protection from anything once those things are gone. Mm-hmm. And it's coming. Either we're leaving or they're leaving, but I can tell you this, we're not cohabitating anymore.
Right.
I know that.
So this goes beyond where we were at when the Declaration of Independence was signed, because there seemed to be still a need for protection against...
Yeah, but if you read those words with that in what I just said in mind, they actually allude to that. And that's what I'm saying about the English language. You can have subtleties in there that anybody that has a knowledge base will read those words a certain way. Mm-hmm. So they're saying the three things that they said, including those, or as well as, or something. So
yeah, I'll read that. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these
yes.
are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Yes. So that's the thing. So why did they have those words among these? It's not just
limited.
it's not a nice thing. Just let's just throw that in there. They mean that there is more to this than that, but it's at least this. So in the time being, and I think they knew where they were in history, we understand that there are rules of engagement, and you guys have these possessions, like the Queen's Oath says, for a period of time. And I think they knew that they weren't at the stage we are at now, mm-hmm. and therefore, yeah, we understand that, but we need to have this. So, and that's what happened with Daniel when you read the story too. It says it. Doesn't tell you the whole story, but he looked through some books and figured out, hey, this slavery was supposed to be only for 70 years, and last time I looked, we're over. And because nobody said anything, you guys would just carry on like this forever, wouldn't you? So he invoked whoever was watching this thing, the Watchers, and said, no, time's up. The contract is over. So they went from slavery in one day to get all these people out of here, help them rebuild their temple in Jerusalem, and open up the treasury and give them all the gold. It was like that. So I went, that's a pretty big story, and they're not really telling me everything. Like, why is that? Like, that's drastic. Whatever happened there is drastic. Like, that's like, how do you make the king who has these slaves all of a sudden, yeah, get these, like, we're done as of today, like tomorrow out.
But it's like you said, it's almost, most of it wasn't a 3D action. It's an action that invokes something in the
Something
higher
else.
realms, right?
Yes, and that's what made it so there wasn't an argument. It was like next day, the kind of thing. Like, whoops, yep, sorry. And so I had some of those experiences in my life too, because apparently we have dominion according to the Bible, and so I started acting like that, and I'm getting the same kind of results.
And that's a Pandora's box in itself.
Yep. So all I'm saying is, if I have it, y'all got it too. We just need to come together,
Yeah.
and act like that.
And that opens up a whole Pandora's box in itself, right? But specific to 5G, so what InPower is, going to be producing soon is a document that is going to allow all of us to participate in this process of, would you call it liability? Like claiming liability is being brought upon us, and therefore,
Well, we're going into a contractual agreement in a jurisdiction called Lex Mercatoria, where, because this is a commercial endeavor, we are agreeing to this commercial endeavor because they have to get our agreement, but we are conditionally agreeing upon them proving that it's safe. And we give them a time limit. It's 14 days actually. So just so you know that, if they can't and they don't, then they are agreeing to certain terms by tacit agreement, which is what they've been trying to get from us. We're tacitly agreeing to 5G. So that's how they're operating, and they'll try and pretend like they're not, but I know exactly what they're doing. And so we are using the same tactic. Okay, I see that I've agreed to something, but here's my actual agreement, not a tacit one. I'm going to actually express it
yeah.
in contractual terms in a very clear, concise, full disclosure way. So I will conditionally agree to 5G upon your proof of that it's safe, and if you can't, then I will be charging you a daily fee or a monthly fee or whatever it is, or however we end up with that. But it'll probably be a daily fee. Do we have an agreement? You got 14 days to answer. Yeah. If you don't answer, then you have agreed. So that's how it works. So at the 14 days, because of Lex Mercatoria and how things have to be done in a certain way, you have to give them an opportunity to cure. So you go, notice of fault. You didn't answer my question. If that was an oversight or a mistake, or if you need more time, or whatever it is, I'm giving you another 14 days or 7 days or whatever it is. And then after that, that is a default judgment. So then you send a notice of default. So when we send those notices of default, in my personal case, that's when people step down most of the time.
And again, if they respond to that request, that means they accept in principle the counteroffer.
Yes.
And they might have conditions and
yes, and so then the contract would go back and forth,
yeah,
until there was a full agreement on both parties' sides.
So say, for example, they gave you some proof of its safety, then that could be examined in detail to see if it actually is proving the safety of 5G or not.
Yes, and they have to swear to it. So that's the thing. It's an affidavit form, so they have to actually perjure themselves.
Okay.
Which adds a whole other level to this thing. So this is the thing about commerce. It's kind of do or die. It's very it's gentlemanly, but at the core of it, it's like, let's get to the bottom of this. Stop lying. We don't have time to
We don't have time. The
prove.
tide's coming out.
The tide's coming in. We do not have time to prove one way or the other. Like, we're getting to the bottom of this within the next 3 hours.
Yeah.
And if you don't like it, you're not going to like what happens to you.
And all the kind of tricks, like forget about the tricks. You can see what's what. You
Yeah,
can see what's
they
true.
will. Yeah, and so what would happen in those cases is the boat would be seized, your booth at the fair would be seized, your stuff, like literally vigilante people would leave right from there. Not next day, like right now, we're going and taking your stuff until this is until you pay him or whatever the judgment was. It was dealt with, and that's what this is. And they do it to us all the time. Once you see this, you'll see that that's what's happening to you all the time on the, with the police and the court system. It's very fast and it's quick judgments, not this long drawn out common law thing.
Yeah.
They're operating in Lex Mercatoria, and so I just started doing that. And I started with, can you prove you're a court? Oh, well, we weren't expecting that. Well, that's what I want.
On what authority are you making that statement?
Or doing any of this stuff to me.
Right.
So if we're in Lex Mercatoria, then I get my point of view across it contractually, and you put me in jail, it's this amount of, this amount, you arrest me, it's this amount, like that type of thing, right? So you just make it up as you go along, like any other contract.
Right.
It's dynamic.
So when is this paper coming out? This form coming out that helps us to participate in this process?
Well, you can participate with, in my opinion, again, the smart meter one is a better one. It's stronger, and the smart meters are part of 5G anyway. Mm-hmm. They're an integral part. They rolled those out first. It's where 5G touches your home.
Okay.
So think of it in that way. And even though it's already here and we all think it's like no big deal, no, it's a big deal. And there's evidence that the fires, the weird fires where 8 houses in a cul-de-sac are gone and one is pristine. There's targeting involved with that, and the meters were were part of the targeting.
Wow.
So just be aware that the meters are more insidious than you think, and they are part of 5G. So and at the end of the day, all the 4 agendas that we're going to, if you follow the money and or the authority or who's giving the orders, it all ends up at the same spot. It's the same beings doing all of this at the very top. So right. No matter which way you come, we're coming at 4 different ways because everybody comes with the thing that's bothering them the most, and we understand that. We're not trying to funnel anybody, but I am telling you that the meter thing is a strong position from our point of view, because it is on your home and you're supplying the base, and that has extra things attached to it that the 5G is not touching you like that. I mean, it is touching you, but there's not a clear demarcation point like with the meter.
Okay.
Where this is actually mine and your thing won't work without mine. Mm-hmm. Therefore, I'm supplying something to make your thing work, and therefore I need to be compensated for my supply. So just be aware of that. As far as the time, we're working on it, but as I said earlier, like I'm not an expert, but I'm working with 2 experts, and it is mind-boggling what this thing is. It's more than what you think, and it goes into under earth, underwater, it's there's something bigger going on than I understand, but I can see the what its capabilities, but what they're actually trying to do, it's pretty complex. And anybody that I've talked to that has studied this thing, and I ask them this question: is this designed by man? And they go, no. There's something else going on here. They're getting information from other dimensions or whatever it is, but this is technology, the way it's organized and how one thing works off the other. There's something going on with this. So, not to, and it's not a, I'm not afraid of it at all. Like, not at all. I have zero fear of it.
Right.
I understand what it is, and I understand the consequences if it's not stopped. I fully understand what that means. But at the same time, I know we can stop it.
Yeah, it's a call to action, right?
So it's just that, and I'm not guessing at it or hoping even. I'm fully, I'm actually already there. It's just the reality is lagging behind a little bit. That's all. It's all it is to me. It's just I've already moved there. This thing just has to come along
into that future where we've overcome this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, where can, if people want more information about what we talked about here, you have a website, right?
Yep, that is inpowermovement.com.
Okay, inpowermovement.com.
Yeah, and so we're just in a transition where we're opening up, we want to open up a platform that can handle worldwide, multi-language, multi-laws, in order to make this thing go as big as we think it can go, as fast as it wants to. So that takes some thought and some technology that can handle without crashing and burning and all that stuff. So, and we have to be compliant with all, it's a lot. So we're in this transition stage where we're going to open that up. We've already got it, so it's not like a future, money has been paid, and so we just have to get that thing where it's functioning, and this is speaking to that, and all that stuff. So that's where we're at right now. So within the next few months, at most, we should be able to onboard everybody, and then we're working on the notices of liability at the same time. So we have groups working on each one for each country and languages, and
right.
And people are popping up all over the world. So it's amazing to watch. Like, this isn't me doing this. I'm not that smart. I'm not that clever. I'm not even that motivated to do that. There's something else going on here. I'm just doing my part.
Right.
And my part is, it is important. I'm not tooting my own horn because I went through a training program, for lack of a better word, and that's why I have to be able to be a part of it, because I know how this thing works, how the Lex Mercatoria works.
Yeah.
And I went through the hard way, and I know it. I wouldn't say I know everything, but I know enough to deal with what we have to deal with. And if I need to know more, I'm sure I will be trained.
You will be prompted to
walk down that, open that door, go talk to that guy, because that's how it's always been. And when I look back on my life, I can see a definite path. And like I tell everybody, if I was asked at the beginning you need to go over there, I wouldn't have done it.
Yeah.
I went through hell, and because it was day by day and just dealing with what was right in front of me at that time, I was able to get through it. But if I was shown the whole thing, no. And that's why, the guys that signed the Declaration of Independence, I don't know if I would have signed it. I really don't. I'm pretty steadfast, but that, I wasn't there. Maybe I would have signed. I'd be on the borderline, but I tell you, I wouldn't be one of these guys. Oh yeah, I would have signed that in a heartbeat. No, I'm not. Yeah. I'm honest with myself. That's a lot. That's
putting everything on the line.
That was everything on the line.
Life and everything.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you very much, Cal, for this discussion, and you can rest assured that Collective Evolution is going to be following the progress that you make on your website and with the documents you're created. We're going to let people know how they can get involved in the InPower movement, how they can be part of the resistance to the 5G being installed in their area, and really start to be part of this awakening that's happening with humanity. So thank you very much for being with us.
Oh, thank you, Richard.